Hey, welcome, buddy, to DEFCON 1 Science. Yes, it's been a long while since we've actually done one of these. I have the wonderful, the genius Landon Curt Noll with me today. He and I are going to kind of ask you guys what you guys want to see on this channel as far as science-related content. We have been brainstorming, and there's just so many things out there, and I need to know who I wanted to bring on board in order to satisfy you all what you want for your lust for science. But you guys may remember we've done some episodes of these before. We did some nuclear stuff before. We did... what else did we do, Landon? By the way, welcome, Landon. First of all, hi, buddy.
Thank you, Steve, and it's always a great pleasure to be on. And again, congratulations for being a voice of reason, critical thinking, and even philosophy.
Even philosophy. I even do some philosophy. You know,
so I have to trigger you somehow.
Well, yeah,
no.
What good is science without philosophy? I think they kind of go hand in hand.
Absolutely, because it wasn't for philosophy, we wouldn't have a foundation of science.
Yeah, I used the terminology the other day. I said to somebody that I thought philosophy is more like the code behind science, right? The underlying methodology of science is philosophy, because without things like scientific method and without falsificationism and things of that nature, then what good does science actually do us? Because if science is going to go out there and try to find some kind of natural explanation to a natural phenomenon, then the way that goes about doing that is by methodological naturalism, which clearly falls under philosophy, right?
Yes, and the whole development of that throughout the years has been shaped by philosophy,
methodological naturalism, which
perhaps has been mirrored by philosophy, or philosophy has explained what they're doing. Because not all scientists are philosophers, but not all philosophers are scientists. But anyway, so hello, folks. Hello, chat room. I actually have somebody who's screen sharing the chat. Because I'm not on YouTube, so I saw a few friends in there. I even see a Red Eye there. Hey, hello to Red Eye. How you doing? And someone asked about how do you make a nuclear weapon. I'm not sure that's the best way of doing it, but I think didn't we do a show where we talked about essentially
we did a nuclear weapons show. Yeah, I mean the answer to that is real simple, very carefully. I mean, if you guys remember the Demon Core incident where they had a criticality incident by unfortunately putting two halves of a polonium sphere together way too close, which caused a very high addition of reactivity. I think the person at the time when he did that probably knew he was dead, because it released an inordinate amount of energy that basically I think killed him within days, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, there's people that as I say, and so that talk was about what parts of nuclear weapons are difficult, and issues about non-proliferation. And that's actually a topic that's actually been relatively recent with regards to things regarding countries like Iran and North Korea. But anyway, so other things that I see people in the chat room, getting Richard Feynman, getting Mr. Feynman would be an interesting time travel trick, I think.
Hey, now, according to Feynman diagrams, particles can actually go backwards. You have an event of some kind. You have a positron going backwards in time, your electron going forward in time. Although it's very, very quick. It's just like on the Planck's times length. But the way you look at the diagram is that one particle is actually traveling backwards in time, right? So
I can sense him rolling in his grave, because he would say it can be modeled as if time is going backwards for that particle. But doesn't mean that time does.
So you knew him. You were actually friends with him.
I wouldn't say friends. I was, and I learned later on that Feynman's one of his genius ideas is that if you can't explain something in simple terms to somebody, you don't really understand it. And so I just thought he was a nice guy trying to explain to me stuff, and so he started off with relativity. And he explained general relativity, and it made perfect sense.
Relativity, I think, froze your camera there.
The embarrassing thing, again, so give you a little slack here, but when he started explaining quantum mechanics, I started saying, well, now you're being silly, right?
Nobody understands quantum mechanics.
And this is the arrogance of youth or the naivety of youth and so forth. So I have to admit that I I was sort of pushing back on Feynman on quantum mechanics, Mr. QED. But I learned later on he was trying to refine his ability to explain things in simple terms. He thinks that everything in the universe, if we really understood it, is explainable to people in very simple terms.
Yeah, but as Red Eye notes, he astutely notes that you were kind of mentored by him to some degree, obviously.
A bit on there. I mean, he was the guy that introduced me to Teller. And that's how I got to be intern with Teller. But my main thing of why I was allowed to run Teller is that I had ability to interpret his speech when Teller would get mad and he'd go into his thick Hungarian style and yell at people. There are people that would sit there and have no idea what he's saying. He never wanted to lose his accent.
Myself, actually. People tell me that all the time. Steve, what are you saying?
He never wanted to lose his accent, right? But it came out in spades on there. But he's always one of the people that came out of that. There was a group of Hungarians that were just extraordinary. That's where Erdős people like von Neumann. I mean, there was a bunch of really, really amazing folks that came out of that little area there. And so I had the ability to sort of interpret his English accented Hungarian when he was yelling at somebody who they would leave and they come back and say, "What did he say?" And I said, "Well, you left the copier machine without paper."
Well, this must have been in the 70s or 80s. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, he was advanced in years, but I remember one part of the thing as well. We'll finish the reminiscence there, but
sure.
Part of the thing was that he actually was advocating the total, now we would call it open sourcing of nuclear weapons. He felt if everyone knew everything about nuclear weapon design, no one would have an advantage and no one would be crazy enough to use them, was his philosophy, right?
Yeah, I don't know if that's actually would work in geopolitics. I mean, I understand mad clearly, but unfortunately, that is on the predication that humans are rational beings and that you're not going to have some kind of outlier that is going to go all psychotic and go, "Oh, I have a nuclear weapon now. I'm going to do something with it," right? I mean, there are some regimes that I think clearly, if they develop nuclear weapons, their intent is to actually use them at some point because they're not sane people.
So back to say, okay, go ahead. You're back again.
Oh, did I freeze? Because you froze there for a second. So I'm not sure why, because I got a really good connection. So
it says my internet connection's unstable.
Yeah, so I know it's on your end because my internet's really, really good actually.
On there. So if necessary, I can switch over to a spot if it turns out this becomes more of a problem. Anyway,
it seems to be fine. But real quick, before we actually start getting into questions and answers, a lot of people are new to my channel. Like I said, this is a kind of a show that we used to do long ago, and I thought it'd be kind of good to just have a Q&A with Landon here. He's going away for a couple weeks, and I'm going to miss him, and this is, some time I get to spend with him. But maybe people don't know who you are, so maybe you want to kind of tell them a little about your background, because you literally are a computer scientist, mathematician, astronomer who pretty much helped develop the internet. I mean, you have your fingers in a little bit of everything. You're like the guy behind the scenes pulling the strings to all the smartest people on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on a farm outside of the San Francisco Bay Area, and my main job on the farm was egg production, and I used those eggs to go to college. Use egg money, literally, to go to college. And a lot of it was, let's say, as naive stuff. No one told me about SATs or any of that college interest stuff. And back in the day when something like University of California or California State University was affordable, like $30 a unit, right? And so I just on registration day, I went up there. I had a Band-Aid box full of cash, and went up there and I paid money and started enrolling in a class. And people just thought I belonged there, and I just thought you just pay money to take classes.
you just pay to learn. Yeah, as my webmaster in the live chat said, so you're an egghead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, totally an egghead.
But I retired from farming, and I had some really remarkable connections with people like Dr. Lamer, a mathematician named Erdish, Selfridge, Selfridge, a lot of people that were, fairly, and they were just nice people interested in explaining math. And then also with Feynman and the physics stuff, and Caltech and Lawrence Berkeley and so forth. And along the way, I found some, a couple of largest known primes, a couple of largest known perfect numbers. Got involved.
Wait. You're just not going to gloss over that. You just didn't find them. You held 2 worlds record before the age of 18.
Yeah, and also if you count the perfect numbers, there's two largest known perfect numbers as well for the time. But it was something to do. Again, proof by computer. In fact, that's one of the early conversations I had with Feynman, was how do we know those numbers are prime? And we had a really, actually, I think, Steve, you would call it a philosophical discussion of, is proof by computer a proof?
Yeah, in fact, I think, wasn't it Dr. Rachel Traylor was going to, she's talked a little bit about that, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's a really difficult philosophical question. If a computer solves or says something is actually proven, but is that something that we can rely upon to say that it is actually proven? Because once something is proven, it can never be disproven. It's in perpetuity. It's forever and ever and ever. So you could say, well, what happens if you find a flaw in the proof? Well, in that case, it was never proven to begin with. It's something like in philosophy, there's something called the principle of attribution and retraction, which is, if you think you know something, if I say I know it's going to rain tomorrow and it does not rain tomorrow, you don't go back and say you had false knowledge. What you say is, I was wrong about my claim to having knowledge to begin with. So you never had the knowledge.
Yeah.
You never had the knowledge. So if you find a proof that's invalid, if for some reason you find an error in it later on, you just say, well, the proof was never validated to begin with, so you didn't disprove it. Once something is actually proven, it is no longer disprovable.
From a let's say from a mathematics perspective, again, and I agree with what you said. Another way to think about it is, you'd say the peer review process failed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There is a pragmatic question about what is a mathematical truth, and a pragmatic response might be a statement that the vast majority of math departments would be considered true.
Yeah, well, I mean, that sounds more like a consensus theory of truth to me, but
I mean, by the way, it's done as a joke, right?
Yeah,
That's done as kind of a joke. But
I would take your no. I would take a pragmatic aspect of it too. If there's pragmatic reasons to accept it as a proof, then go ahead. But the problem is philosophy has pretty good rigor, but mathematics they're like the ultimate in rigor. You don't get much more rigor. What subject has more rigor than mathematics?
Well, I would say there's a subset of mathematics called logic, right? I'm not talking about the philosophical, I mean, mathematical logic, and the people, logicians, are some of the most frustrating people to hold a conversation with, because you think mathematicians are anal. Logicians are like,
oh, I know a few. By the way, I like that about them too. But I have a wonderful friend of mine, Dr. Alex Malpass. He's a logician, and it's almost infuriating having conversations with him, and I mean that in a very, very comical way, because when I'm saying something to him, right, there's always a principle of charity, because he's one of the nicest guys on the planet. But he knows this stuff inside and out, right? I mean, he's operating at a level that's just most humans will never ever see. You're on that same level, so you get this. But I will say something, and it won't be quite perfect, but he'll spend like 20 minutes just fixing kind of thing. But that's
of stuff. Yeah. And so, and my example is Robinson, who was the logician that worked with D.H. Lamer to do the first digital computer primality proofs for Mersenne primes, right? And they found 5 largest known primes. Robinson wrote the program, but this is back in 1952. So you didn't have a keyword to type in stuff. You had a theory of operations of a manual, and he wrote down the decimal numbers of the instructions to enter into the computer for this program to do a proof of primality of the whole Lucas-Lamer sequence, right? Now, that is a pretty formidable thing to say. Could you write a program and hand code the instructions and type it in, and what's the chances of that thing working, right? But not only that, but this was his very, very first computer program he ever wrote. And it worked the first time.
What was the first computer program you ever wrote?
I think the first program I wrote would have been actually probably written in COBOL. Um, and it was on an IBM 36030. It was probably about 1966.
I never learned COBOL. I think one of the first things I ever probably programmed was in a language called Focal.
Oh yeah, I know Focal.
Yeah, it was Focal. It was on a mini computer actually, and
Yeah.
it was about a 3K program. It was on punch tape, literally punch tape. And Fortran had the punch cards, right?
Yeah, I did the part. This is the punch card stuff on.
Yeah, you
on,
had
on
the Fortran for the punch cards. I had a box of those at one time. I had a book on Fortran, tried to learn it. Realized I'm never going to use this. But the punch tape was just this linear tape that had knockouts in it, and that would indicate the code, and you would write it, you'd punch it out. I think that's one of the first things I ever did. That I don't remember what year that was, but it was definitely a long time ago.
Well, it was COBOL, but then I found there was Fortran where you could do formulas easier than the COBOL, which was add blah to blah type of thing. Whereas Fortran you could do sort of the equation stuff. And so my first Fortran program followed was to print the powers of 2 up to the width of the line printer, right? For that, so the multi-precision thing early on.
Yeah, there's so many different languages out there. By the way, we got a super chat, Louis Kai, $2. Support for the 5% that keeps on rocking. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you. Support this guy. He's or you're up here, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm up here. Here's the thing. I'm actually the way I'm in the hangout with Landon here. I'm actually below him, so he would have to point down. But you guys actually see it over here. So
so support down here.
I have to point this way for him because I have it horizontally rather than vertically. So
yeah.
So the wonderful thing of producing, yes.
So in the 60s, it was C. I mean, it was COBOL and Fortran. But then in 74, I discovered C. My uncle was working at Bell Labs at the time. And my dad was doing also, besides farm work, was also doing work with the telephone. And we had a link from our farm to the switching office. And he was doing work on the telephone switching systems. And so we were taught how to use a phone system, right? We had a control line and full system, and you didn't call someone because that was a toll. You used the control codes to ring a number, right?
Right. So, yeah, I remember that. I remember, for example, you had control codes for everything, like for character exchange and
the station stuff. And so you did these hops. If you wanted to call someone in New York, you did all these station hops to do the.
Yeah, you were one of those black box hackers too, probably.
But I was a white box because unlike phone phreaking, this was actually what it was used for. We really were authorized users of the phone system.
Do you remember the whistle?
Oh yeah. And
Captain Crunch.
The Captain Crunch.
Yeah, Captain Crunch, 2600 hertz.
Yeah, and so that was because and this is a cryptographic flaw. The control information going over the same channel as voice, and so in fact, in the old days when you had payphones with coins, right? The way the operator knew you put in a quarter, or a dime, or a nickel was the phone did a little dink, right?
Mm-hmm. And so that sound, right?
You could do the dink, then the operator thought you'd put in stuff, right? That's how. And people in phone phreaking. No, we were doing real legitimate stuff, and so we had a teletype at the farm, and we used actually paper towel rolls as the stuff, and we also would have paper tape stuff, and we made connections to Bell Labs, and it was doing C programming there, and also was at MIT. That's where I found Maxima, right? This cool, really extraordinary. Talk about like the 10 programming wonders of the world. Maxima, the symbolic algebra stuff, which was a precursor of things like Mathematica and Maple and so forth, was an amazing system. And I could handle these equations and do things that were just beyond humans' ability to grind stuff through.
You were the human computer back then. I mean, you were the version of the computer. In fact, you were probably more powerful than most computers back then. I did a program in C, and I'm reading the live chat, and I got to tell you, we must have like a not a young following, because I got to tell you, they're following along exactly what we're talking about when it comes to the phone phreaking and the 2600 hertz, and that's some old school stuff. I mean, that's not modernity by any stretch of imagination, and they're just eating that up. So,
Yeah. And so you're talking about Unix, the fifth edition Unix, not System 5, but the fifth edition of Unix is what I started working on. And I remember because like the user DMR /C was the C compiler. That was Dennis Ritchie's account was there, and he linked it to user bin. That's where user bin comes from, because
user bin, for the
because you had Aho, had Awk, and you had Kernighan had a Lex thing and so forth, and they all linked into user bin, the binary set there. But that was Unix was very early on. I gravitated towards that, and then picking up the Seymour Cray machines with cyber, the cyber stuff and the Cray stuff, and but I also, while living on the farm, we would commonly sleep outside between late spring, mid spring to early fall, when it really didn't rain, right? So sleeping outside under the stars is more comfortable than inside, and so us being able to have the sky overhead was important, but also regularly going out there and seeing the patterns changes. That was something that was there. But early on, I guess the other thing to say is my very first complete sentence I ever spoke as a human being was a question. Yay, because science is about questions. And the question I uttered was, how far is the sun?
And now as an adult.
Yeah, and I learned later I had to go to the transit of Venus, had to wait till 2004, but this is 1962. And I have to admit, I was almost 2 years old, right? I have to admit, at the time, my guess of my model was a flat Earth.
Yeah, I remember you saying that before. Yeah, at one time you were kind of, I guess you could say, a flat earther. By the way, you have a super chat. Ben Marcos, $5. I've never done a super chat before. Oh, well, that's first. Yay! Thank you.
Thank you for the super chat, and
so you gave $5 super chats so Landon could tell a story about being a flat earther. That's a first, because I don't think Landon's talked about being a flat earther before.
So we were on, our farm was on the ridge line next to the Bay Area, and we could see from our ridge farm, we could see all the way from San Jose all the way up through to San Francisco, the Golden Gate, the bridges, all that sort of stuff. And the peninsula was on our other side, and it was dinner time, and I was watching the sun set over the horizon. And I was thinking, if I knew how far away the sun was, and hopefully it was close, I could convince my family to go over there to the edge of the Earth and look over and watch the sun.
Where to go? It fell off the edge. Brian Steven wants to know for $2. Does Landon know R?
R.
I don't know what that is.
AR.
No, just R. Like
probably
letter R,
the
capital letter R.
The language R?
Is there a language R? I know
yeah,
C.
There is. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know C. I never learned C. C++, C sharp. I'm familiar.
AR and there's also is the AR command for doing the archive set too, but there's also capital R language.
Yeah, that's I think is what he's referring to.
There was an R. I think it was an interpreter on NOS and CDC.
Yeah, the only real programming I got into, I started back when on the VIC-20s, Commodore 64, TI-94A. I had access to a K-Pro a long time ago, if you remember those. Mm-hmm. But basically, I really started programming until Visual Basic came along. And what happened was I was programming BASIC for years. I took a computer programming class, and what I did was for our final, they wanted to make a database, like a Rolodex database, right? And it was basically just supposed to be really simple. You have user input, you have your name, you have the address or whatever, and then it would just kind of file it as I think it was a sequential file that we were using, and then you could just type in what you wanted, try to find it for you, right? This was back in like the early 90s, or it had to be like 94, 95. I was just out of the Navy at the time. So what happened was I remember writing this program that I wrote for Radio Shack at one time, which was a RSU program, a Radio Shack Unlimited program. And what I did was I incorporated that into this final, and so I not only made the database program, but I also put the graphics in.
Ah,
I do graphics,
yeah,
and I made it in there so you could have like it would actually show like a Rolodex card. You know how they have Rolodex card is like
yeah,
rectangular, has the two little
yeah.
notches. I'd actually show that on the screen. It was way beyond anybody's else's stuff. I got an A plus, and they're like, we're gonna the instructors like
Yeah.
we're gonna use this for the advanced classes. But then I just kind of fell away from it. And Visual Basic is especially one of those things that if you don't use it, why would you continue
Yeah, yeah.
to remember it? I don't remember any of the code for it any longer.
Yeah. And by the way, the question I asked about Radio Shack, the Radio Shack that I knew we'd go there and buy like an 8080 chip or so forth. That's
8088, 8086.
Yeah, yeah.
But we quad operational
I encourage people to be multi-language, right? And so I was interested in all kinds of languages. So if I listed the number of languages I've actually written programs in, it would be a long list. Being multilingual, I think, is very important. It gives you different perspectives on problems.
They need a different name for that. For like if you program in multiple languages, because if you're a polyglot, you speak multiple languages, right? But if you, what would that be if you're a computer polyglot? There got to be a name for that somehow.
Yeah, but it's got to be there. But a number of languages and languages have their pluses and minuses, right? And just like human languages have pluses and minuses, there's some really big brain damages in some languages and some great things, right? And so because you have a choice in computers, picking the tool that best suits your problem, I think is important there. But I have to say, for example, like one of my current digs is Python, right? If I wanted white space to have semantic meaning, I'd still be programming in Fortran on punch cards. The fact that Python has meaning for white space is absolutely brain damaged, right? And the Python manifesto is insulting, right? The notion that there's only one way to do it and they know it is wrong. And so I would encourage people who program in Python to revolt from the idiots that are in the language and take over the language and do your own things with it. Don't be hamstrung by all the current Python slogans.
I like when you get angry like that. That you literally saw Landon's anger come out. His when he gets passionate about something like they're not going to tell me how to do something their one correct way. I'm going to do it my own way, and it'll probably work even better too, right?
Yeah. But languages that I would encourage people to look at Go. It's a maturing language, so it's a kind of annoying thing, but that's an interesting thing. Look at Swift, look at Ruby. Of course, still look at C, because C still rocks.
Why do they need so many different languages? What's the point of? I mean, back in my day, we had Logo, there was Lisp, there was
Lisp is you should learn Lisp because Lisp is one of those languages. It's like Welsh. Like, where did that come from?
But is there really an advantage to? I mean, is there one programming language that somehow you would use that as more beneficial to like another? For example, like back in the day, Fortran for formula translation. Obviously, if you want to do mathematics and things like that, kind of stuff, Fortran is better. If you want to do business programming, COBOL was better.
I think that languages have their pluses and minuses, right? If, for example, you're trying to control a Unix/Linux system using combinations of shell scripts and tools like awk, so forth, is fine. Yes, you can write it in Lisp, but why would you, right? The Lisp, on the other hand, if you're going to do something really powerful with symbolic stuff, Lisp is extraordinary, right? But it does. So languages have their pluses and minuses, right? Why right now would someone want to program in Fortran? Well, when there are some really good compilers that can exceed Fortran, but oftentimes now as well, the libraries and the tools around the language is what you have to also consider. So it's community that is there.
Yeah, because I had to learn a little bit C way back when, but only was, for example, I'd write in Visual Basic, would have API calls, and there were certain things that I could do faster in a small routine in C than I could in other things.
Yeah,
but,
and so I think
DLLs
Perl
and API calls and
Yeah, I really like Perl. But beware when a language gets to be arrogant. Like, for example, the arrogance of Java, right? The people that were promoting Java, not the people that designed it, right? They're actually, Gosling is actually a really nice guy and pretty proud nerd. But the The Java heads, instead of saying you have to program in Java because it's secure, and you don't want to program those other languages because Java is secure, right? And in fact, so from a logician's point of view, I went back and said, is the Java virtual machine theorem proven, right? Do we know, is there any proof of correctness under a set of axioms? And the answer is no, right? And if someone comes to me interviewing and they claim to be a Java expert, the thing I ask them to do is say, give me some Java code to allow me to arbitrarily read and write bytes in memory. Because they say, well, Java doesn't have pointers. Well, actually, Java has flaws that allow you to drive trucks through it and so forth. So if in fact you think it's secure, you're mistaken. Now, Java has really good things it does really well. And it does things that are poorer. And then it has very interesting founders, and it has community people that are zealots, right?
I'm so glad you're on the good guy's side. I mean, I don't think people realize the amount of destruction you could unleash globally if you ever turn dark. If you ever went to the dark side, you could probably single-handedly destroy the entire internet and all global communication.
And so I don't think it is safe for someone to write critical control code in Python and expect that to remain safe. One of the fundamental flaws of Python is there's no separation between instruction and data, right? In fact, there's no, the Python bytecode stuff is all in data and all real-time stuff. So it's kind of anything goes. If you can get effectively force Python to give you pointers, and you can smash memory and you can do other things. Then externally, if someone has some piece of system administration code that's written in Python and you're non-privileged, you can exploit hardware flaws in chips and get to that code and pwn the machine. And unfortunately, right now, there exists no commercial processor for which you cannot find a series of non-privileged instructions to compromise the integrity of the machine. So for example, there's no Intel processor, there's no AMD processor, there's no RISC processor or Apple Core processor or AIM or whatever, where you can't start with your non-privileged user and you have some non-privileged instruction stream. Might be weird, but that allows you to exploit a flaw and own the machine. No machine right now. So if you allow me to execute arbitrary code on, let's say, your Amazon virtual machine, I can own the hardware that machine's running on. It doesn't matter how much virtualization, containers, and Kubernetes and all that sort of stuff. So you got to be careful, because our hardware today is so complex and so full of holes that you should not naively assume that the hardware is going to protect you, or the operating system is going to protect you, or the language is going to protect you. Don't be naive. That's basically the thing you should do. So
yeah, not everything is. You can't have pure security, right? I mean, there's always going to be things that people can take advantage of. Leslie Russell, $2. I love this guy. Go rules, Java drools. Oh, okay, I get that. Okay,
again, and I don't mean to step on stuff, because Go is a language, you should learn that, right? That's one of the upcoming things. Learn Ruby. Rust is interesting stuff. You should know C. You should, and even heck,
I need to learn C. I really do.
Learn Fortran, learn Prolog, learn Lisp, some of these languages, because
you make it sound so easy. You make it sound like, oh, I'm going to go out there and learn 20 different computer languages. It's like, okay, first of all, I'm really surprised people in the audience, as many programmers that we have, it seems like 80% of people watching actually have some programming experience, which is pretty impressive. But I mean, it takes a lot to learn a language. I mean, even the Visual Basic things are like, the books are like that big, right? I mean, you have to know what the operands are to do just about anything. Then you got to go, okay, this is your structure. That's the thing about C that drives me nuts, is that it's so rigid in its format, and I don't have all that done by rote memorization, right? I never did. I hate rote memorization.
But you should see the International Obfuscated C Code Contest, which I'm a founder of. It's the International Obfuscated IOCCC is the internet's oldest contest, right?
Mm-hmm. I remember that you were part of that. Yep.
And you should see some of the code people do in C. It's they're restricted like 4,096 character. Right? That's the size of the source you're restricted to, and people do amazing stuff in just even that complex.
And you have a knack, it seems like, to take, for example, let's say somebody codes something. Now, back in the day, memory was gold, right? I mean, you had to squeeze every bit for your dollar. I mean, there was the optimization was the key element, because when you're dealing with things like 8 meg, I mean, and I mean 8 meg, it was like small back. What was conventional memory? 640K. I mean, it was just a small amount, right?
But I mean,
so you have 1 meg and then 8.
And that IBM 360 16K was a huge amount of core that took a machine room up. So yeah.
So you had to optimize literally everything. Now you could look at code and for some reason in your brain go, oh, here's some C code. I can make it just a little bit more compact.
Yeah.
A little more streamlined, a little more memory, less intensive. And that's the skill. Because I've tried to do things like that, and I'm like, I don't care. I write the code out. It's probably 4 times longer than it probably needs to be, but now, especially nowadays, with the amount of memories that's out there, I mean, I run 16 meg on this system here. It's an old motherboard, but the memory's good.
Remember Pascal was talking about being rigidly structured?
Yeah.
And poor Nicholas Wirth, who thought that he could create a language where the syntax would prevent you from doing bad programming, right? Modula free and all this sort of crazy stuff there, but yes.
Did you want to read that super chat? You can read that one.
Do you think C is rigidly structured? Remember Pascal? Well, thank you, John, for that $5 in supporting this guy. So part of my philosophy that I went to computers was treating computers not as ends of themselves, but as a tool. And so my approach to computers was tools, and what's the right tool and what's the right attachment to the tool to get the job done, right? So now, one of my mistakes was that because I had access to lots of big hardware. I mean, as a teenager, a small kid, I had access to IBM mainframes, I had access to Cray machines, I had access to and a bunch of stuff. When it came time to look in something like and I saw this Apple I thing, and I said, "What in the world would you want to do with something that?"
Nobody would ever have a use for an Apple I and then the Apple II. Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people were saying home computers would never take off because why would anybody ever need one, right? Leslie Russell, $5. Steve, start with Emacs, Lisp, then Prolog, then move to Clojure. And by the way, I didn't mean to say 16 megs. It's 16 gigs. By the way, we have the 80s mindset right now. What was it? Nobody knew what a gig was back in the 70s.
Yeah, 80s, a gig was your number of tapes in your library, right? So, but yes, Prolog is a really fascinating language because I think languages help you think in interesting ways. And Prolog is one of those very, very, very different languages. Learn Lisp and learn Prolog. They will expose you to what a language can be. They're unusual languages that have had some really beautiful things done with them.
We got a couple questions for you, and then we're going to kind of ask you guys again what you guys want to see as far as science.
And a bunch of science stuff over here. So yes, go
so
ahead.
Puffaluppagus wants to know: can you ask Landon? Oh, I just went off my screen. You guys are doing this way too fast. I'm going to have to find another way to do chat. Okay. He says, where to go? Ask Landon why the recent Intel CPU security flaws requiring disabling SMT to protect against attacks like Spectre and Meltdown.
Well, the part of the problem is that Intel has been cutting corners, trying to produce more and more powerful sockets for less and less cost, right? People want infinite compute power for free. And Intel's been trying to, and so they've been cutting corners. And one of the kind of corners that Intel cuts is a notion of what's called speculative execution, right? If you have code where you say, if this thing is greater than 0, do this, otherwise do that, right? That kind of code. Sure. What they start doing is saying, why, in the way that you might do it, just come up and say, hey, is A less than B? If so, do this, otherwise do that. So you wait until you know what the value of A is, the value of B is, and you say, is A less than B? And you do this stuff or that stuff. Well, speculative execution says, well, let's actually start executing both sides, the truth and the false statement.
Simultaneously?
Yes, simultaneously. Before we know what A and B are, let's try to push, because you might be loading constants and calling other stuff to do things, to get ready. And so speculative execution says, before you know a decision point, start going down both branches. Mm-hmm. And once you find what the value is, you kill off one branch and do the other. Right? And actually, especially because you can go several levels deep, several decisions deep down the tree, executing stuff in advance, trying to do as much as possible. Part of it is that that processors are so fast compared to memory. Processors really take off. You can do a lot of stuff, of instructions, before this slow DRAM will send stuff over the bus, right?
See, it's so weird that you say that RAM is so slow, because I remember making RAM disk. I remember, coding and stuff, because it was DOS 2.11. There was all these versions of MS-DOS, but I remember making RAM disks where, I look, for example, I have a game or something I was playing, and I have to draw it off the floppy, right? And so what you would do is you would make a RAM drive, so it would take the entire program, stick it in RAM, which has faster access. So, for you to say that it's slow nowadays is I get it, because times have changed, because now you're dealing with such a different type of technology that back then RAM was considered to be super fast, because it's a hell of a lot faster than trying to access an actual, 5.25 floppy.
The processor is so much faster, right?
Yeah, but the processor is so much faster, sure.
And then say, well, I've got like we have machines now where you put 64 cores on a chip, right? Having lots of cores doesn't help, because now all those cores are hungry for memory, and that bus, that freeway lane to data, is limited. So having more cores doesn't make you go faster. In some ways, it makes it more slow, because everyone's trying to contend.
Well, isn't
for
it
that.
usually for on a six processor, we have 2 logical cores per processor?
Yeah. And I say that's kind of the and yes, so you have even thread stuff where a processor might have an A and B thread.
Yeah.
So all these cores start doing the speculative execution to figure out what can they do in advance, so that once the tree is known. Also, memory-wise, and fetching memory, and I say, if you have some loop where you say you loop 1,000,000 times, it predicts the branch and says, well, gee, at the bottom of the loop, most likely you'll go to the top, because that's most of the time. And so it will actually go and prefetch the next thing, assuming the branch is going to succeed. So here's one of the fundamental flaws that Intel has done, is that this stuff in advance, try it in advance and guess, has side effects. And you can exploit those side effects. You could have situations where, if it was doing sequentially, it would sit there and say, that's a local memory, you can't do that. But instead, you have it go into that space speculatively, produce a side effect, and you say, okay, can I detect the side effect? The answer turns out to be yes.
So it's definitely not sequential. It's more of a parallel type processing thing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Roy says,
and so that's a big problem. And by the way, I hate to tell people, and I can't really talk about it, but there's some more Intel bugs that have come out.
Shocking. Well, shocking.
And right now they're trying to figure out how to mitigate them. Right? That's why they haven't announced yet.
Yeah. Roy says for $2, loving this conversation. Yeah, we do too. I miss these conversations, and I miss having Landon around. He's a busy guy, and the fact that he comes in and spends his time with us, I'm honored. But every time he does, it's like, how could you not enjoy the conversation? You could probably listen to him for hours. And by the way, I have. I mean, even in Discord, Landon will jump in and just anything. You pick a subject, and all of a sudden this wealth of information comes out.
So computer stuff was done. A lot of it's getting involved in astronomy, becoming a planetary scientist, working on computers as tools, working on mathematical problems, working in cryptography, and fun stuff. Going solar eclipses. So, for example, I'm going to Pitcairn Island, and if you don't know where Pitcairn Island is, look it up. For a total solar eclipse, we're going to be looking for asteroids orbiting inside the orbit of Mercury, very, very close to the sun. And it's difficult to point telescopes near the sun unless they're a solar telescope, right? To image very, very faint objects.
You're actually taking visual observations.
Yes, trying to,
That's
or
pretty
and
impressive.
near infrared observations.
Okay.
Objects that are like as faint as Pluto next to the sun is extraordinarily difficult. I mean, it is, you're because you might have something like 40 astronomical magnitude difference between the sun's brightness and this object's brightness. So one of the ways we do it is wait until the moon covers the sun. We blots out that, so at least you can reduce the sun's glare by a significant amount, and then try to image stuff on the side.
And you had some pretty good. You were at the last total solar eclipse. You were actually there, and you got some good data from that, didn't you?
Yep, yep. And I say
Yeah.
we didn't find any volcanoid asteroids. We were looking for other things too. We were looking for some work. We were actually part of our goal. That was also the 2015 one. Was Dr. May's doctoral thesis about dust in the solar system being polarized, and doing imaging stuff relating to that was something there. But anyway, so I've this will be my 18th solar eclipse,
Wow,
and
man.
I will reach 50 minutes of totality. With
How
this,
many?
50 minutes, 50.
How,
I've been
how do
50
you
minutes
eat
before the
50
sun don't
minutes?
shine.
That's an awful lot of totality.
Yeah, but they're very precious times where the experiment runs. On the other hand, what you should do when you see an eclipse is let all that technical equipment do its thing. You pay attention to what's going on, because there's no replay. There's
Yeah.
no TiVo. There's no, take the cell phone. Don't even waste your time with devices. Pay attention. In
I
fact,
hear it's an eerie experience, like very surreal, like almost a spiritual thing that you're like in tune with the universe for that amount of time. And I would like to experience that because I can envision it in my head. I can picture what it would probably be like, but of course the experience is probably nothing like the actual what I'm envisioning. But I think it would be a very very um,
yeah,
humbling experience. I mean, think about it, because even the woodland creatures, even animals, know something's going on, and they
yeah.
all of a
The
sudden they
plant
go into their nocturnal mode.
and
And
and and,
we're
and
animals, so
animals get jet lagged. For example, I like to go to eclipses that are in, let's say, Africa. The daytime animals that when it gets to be nighttime go into these burrows, these thickets to protect themselves from the predators. Um, Middle of the day, it starts getting cold and dark, and so they say, "Hey, time for me to go to sleep." And so they go into the hole and go to sleep, not realizing that a couple minutes later it's back to daylight.
it messes with them.
Now they don't, and the animals are tuned to say, when you go to sleep and you're practically in that hole or in that thicket, don't keep popping your eye out saying, "Is it still light? Is it daylight yet?"
Yeah,
Right?
so they're gonna sleep a lot. They're gonna, and all of a sudden they're gonna get up in the daytime or
They're going to
nighttime,
get up
or
at nighttime,
and
jet
then
lag.
yeah, okay, so yeah,
So they wake up not able to sleep,
and they're wide
and then
awake at
these
night.
lions and cheetahs and leopards and so forth, also there's all this food wandering around, and so they start a feeding frenzy, right? And there's this gorge fest of carnivores eating animals that
I
woke up
never
at the
even
wrong
thought
time.
about that. That actually makes
And then you
sense.
drive around because you want to see like leopards with a belly sort of full saying, "Please,
They
no
must
more."
love the eclipses then. Uh,
It's this little bit of trauma that occurs along these paths.
got a couple more questions here. Gleams ask, could you ask a question? Could the erroneous measurements in the galaxy rotation curve problem be just as simple as have the dimensions of the universe incorrect? Now, I'm not quite sure what that is. I know that galaxies have, the speeds of the edge of the galaxies have issues because of dark matter, but
Well, it's one of the
is that what you're
science
into?
things I was going to talk about, which is that the shape of the galaxy. We've been learning more about it, right? So I wouldn't say that it's either incorrect, but we had speculated that the Milky Way galaxy was a fairly flat thing. It looks like a spaceship with spiral arms and a bulge in the middle, and we presume it's fairly flat. But we have this mission called Gaia, Gaia. It's the European Look Up Gaia mission, and it's an instrument that is cataloging the position of velocity of about 1% of all the luminous objects in our galaxy. Right? It's an extraordinary mission where we have now extraordinary detailed things about not only where things are and distances, but also motion. And one of the things we realize is that that flat Milky Way is actually kind of a little bit potato chipped. It's a little bit warped, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now the model might be that the Milky Way had an interaction with another galaxy in the past and is still warbling out. It could be that the dark matter is tugging on it a little bit asymmetrically. But maybe that's what.
Yeah, I know that they had a couple galaxies that were kind of light in dark matter, but in other words, I don't know how else to put it. There
Yeah,
just wasn't there was some missing dark matter there. They were light in the dark matter.
Why is there
But
not matter? I mean, it seems like that the ratio of dark matter, and that's not dark energy, but dark matter stuff, which appears to be stealthy to light. What do you mean by that? Well, there's this stuff out there that we've never seen reflect light, absorb light, or emit light. It seems
dark.
In any frequency. It seems to be completely stealth to all frequencies. Not maybe that doesn't interact at all. Maybe it's so tiny we've never been able to detect it. And astronomers are really good at detecting it. So if it interacts with light, it's extremely weak. The thing we do know is there's a gravitational field. And moreover, there's about 6 times more mass, or 5, depending on how you count it, than normal matter. So you got 24% of this dark matter stuff, which we can detect by its gravitational field, and 4% of everything else. So all the stuff, even all the particles we create in like CERN accelerator, normal matter is 4%, and 24% of the energy is this dark matter stuff. And by dark matter stuff, meaning we see the effects of the gravitational field. And this ratio of 6 to 1 is a typical ratio, but some galaxies have more, and some galaxies have less.
But the ones we found, what I was going with that was that the galaxies we thought was almost non-existent, not dark matter. They found out that they just got the distance wrong on a lot of them.
And there's other things.
Yeah, again, they factored it in. As a true science person, they revisited their data, realized their initial assessments were incorrect, and they think that there's more along the lines what they would expect to be. Just a question to me. Hi, Harry. Says, can we expect Kirsten Banks returning as a guest? I saw she was on Q&A with Dr. Brian Cox. I've talked to Kirsten. I know she really does want to come back on. She loves talking to you guys, and
I'd love to have a show with her as well, because we'd have a fun conversation.
Well, yeah, and I'm gonna arrange something. Now she's a PhD candidate, and she's working to her PhD, and she's busy doing these TED Talks, and she's working to be the next science communicator for astrophysics like Neil deGrasse Tyson. So she's got a lot on her plate, but I know that she really wants to come in at some time, and we were going to have a discussion on quantum mechanics of some kind.
That's another weird spot. So, yes. Yeah. Someone asked you, is dark matter present in all galaxies? Every galaxy we've been able to measure dark matter has had dark matter in it. Some galaxies are more weighted towards matter than others. On average, about 6 to 1, but we found dwarf galaxies where it appears that the dark matter is like 100 to 1, right? So, so it kind of varies there, but most of them, there's a pretty steep peak, and the peak is around 6 to 1. We have not found a galaxy that we've been able to accurately measure that's quote dark matter free, right? Everything's got at least some in it. And we think that dark matter influenced how galaxies evolved and perhaps how they form, which is one of the reasons why we want to know more about it, because it appears to be pretty important.
Pavlopoulos asks, follow-up, should we expect serious AMD CPU security flaws to begin surfacing as market saturation increases?
I mean, yes. I mean, so AMD has...
I need a $1 super chat real quick. You didn't...
Thank you.
You didn't put anything on there, but thank you, Pavlopoulos.
So AMD has a problem with that. For example, they are kind of by monopolistic practices of Intel, try to make their stuff Intel compatible. Because if someone said, here's an AMD machine, but it doesn't run in your Intel software, people wouldn't buy it. So some ways they have to emulate some of the behavior, and that causes them to have to emulate some of the flaws. AMD chip designers, I think, have been much more careful. And when some of the control stuff, like how operating systems work, so forth, I think are much better done on AMD. It's not that AMD isn't flaw free, but Intel is being caught being kind of sloppy and pushing. And I've had interactions with Intel where I've shown them flaws, and their response is, you're doing something weird. Like the famous Pentium reciprocal bug,
Oh yeah,
We
oh yeah.
found
Back in the
that
day, that was one of the biggest blunders or whatever. I don't. I mean, I remember that when the Pentium bug fiasco came out.
here's an
Yeah, wow.
example of
That was a
an
floating point
experiment.
problem, wasn't it?
We found a problem. We were trying to model the orbit of Pluto and do simulations rolling it forward and back in time to look at the resonance between Pluto and Neptune and other things. And we kept having things where the chip would cause Pluto to fly off and do weird stuff, right? Calculus would go bogus, right? And we brought this up to Intel and showed them there's these calculations that are not correct because you could do it elsewhere. And Intel's response is, "Oh, you're doing something weird, and we don't think it's important." And we say, "But it's wrong." And
Right.
well, you're
It
doing
gives you
something
the
weird.
wrong information. It's incorrect. It's not right.
And so, but to be fair, Cray had a flaw in their reciprocal approximation, which is how they divided. They didn't divide. They took a reciprocal number and multiplied it by a number. So instead of saying x divided by y, you did whatever y, and then multiplied by x, right? And there was a flaw in the firmware of Cray's from Cray Model 1 up through Cray Model 13 that we found because we were trying to do primality testing and it was failing to confirm known pri.
Do you think that because of these errors in the past that we're coming up to 2020 here, do you think that computer processing and computer programming and all that stuff it's got into so much better because we've learned from the past that we don't want to have these problems? But even then, it doesn't seem to be the case because we're talking about AMD flaws, we're talking about Intel flaws, we're talking about all these different flaws that keep propping up. I mean, every time we seem to solve one thing, there's something else. As computers get bigger and better and faster and more powerful, other problems seem to creep up.
Yeah, I mean, there's an old adage: code has bugs, more code has more bugs, right? Hardware has bugs, more hardware has more bugs. And so as we try to cram more and more stuff into hardware and try to be more power efficient and cheaper and so forth, we continue to cut corners.
What has the biggest
And
effect, do you think, the hardware or software bugs?
hmm, it depends on who is the effect. If you talk about something like a handheld device, like one of these kind of things,
Hmm.
your hardware bugs are going to bite you. But there's also operating system bugs. I mean, people make a sport out of trying to jailbreak Apple phones, right?
Yeah,
That's
they want to
right.
they root them, and you talk about rooting them.
It is not a sport to jailbreak an Android phone. Android is jailbroken by design, right? There's no protection on the Android system. Now, people like that because you're playing with a phone. That's really good, right? If you want a phone that's just as an appliance, that's not so good. Again, AMD, I think overall, AMD's quality of their hardware has in the past been better. We'll see what the new stuff is. Now, disclaimer, Intel's corporation is in Santa Clara. AMD's corporation is living in Sunnyvale. So we're like right next door and rivals. And so I tend to be a pro AMD person because they're my hometown.
Yeah, you were mayor of Sunnyvale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, but in general, I think AMD has, if I would say given a choice between an Intel processor and an AMD processor, try AMD. You'll be there.
No, I like look. All I've really ever had was AMD processors for the last couple of years or so. I mean, AMD was basically it. I couldn't afford it. I had bought an i5 laptop, right? It was a refurbished i5 laptop. Got it for like $108. Really good. It's a T430. I happen to really like it. It's not super powerful, but it does what I want. I put Linux Mint on it. I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, now it still has Windows 10 on it. I'm
Yeah.
not a big Windows 10 fan on laptops. I don't know why. I don't like it. I really can't stand it. Now on Windows 10 on desktop, it's not as bad. That's what I'm running now on this computer. But Linux Mint, I really like it. And I went through a lot of distros. I've tried so many different distros. I mean, you name it, I probably tried it at some time. What I did was I just downloaded the ISO. I got a VM box, and I was like, okay, let's see how this one looks. Let's try this. Desktop type. Let's try this. Is it GNOME or KDL or whatever? And I'm like, I found that Mint seems to be. It looks really good. It's stable. It does everything I want it to do. And so, if you're
And they're
looking for a
not
good
too. The
build,
community is not too wacky
yeah,
on
I
there.
mean Ubuntu.
Ooh,
I have Ubuntu too.
hey.
I put Ubuntu on it, but I didn't like the Ubuntu. I
So
mean, one version I did.
Aussie Globehead has
Yeah,
donated 50.
Australian.
Is that didgeridoo dollars, dollar dues on there? Thank you very much.
He
It's
says
only
I.
worth 50 cents.
Go ahead and read it. Yeah.
But it says, I know this Aussie dollar is only worth 50 cents, so you can buy a cookie with this.
I
But
like cookies. I bought cookies yesterday. I went shopping. Well, actually, it
hey,
was yesterday or this morning. No, it was this morning. I went shopping early this morning, and I bought. I was going to make some oatmeal cookies, but I was like, you know what? I'm just not going to stress with this, and I just wanted some cookies, so I bought oatmeal cookies.
so Aussie Global, if you had the right cookie, you could move trillions of dollars, right? If you had the right. So some cookies are really tasty. And of course, Trillion, thank you for the quality content. And of course, Trillion, by the way, I actually have to ask you, are you the British Trillion or are you the modern Trillion?
I didn't know there was different types.
Well, it used to be, and they changed it in the UK that a billion was actually 10 to the 12th, not 10 to the ninth,
Hmm.
and a trillion was actually what would have been 10 to the
And 1K is
18th.
1024, and 1 calorie is 1,000 calories. I'm
Well,
telling you,
you
all this
you
stuff's
had
confusing.
million and milliard and billion and billiard
Yeah,
and trillion and trilliard
there's
there,
just no
but
such thing as a standard. Is there?
they changed all that stuff, right? But one of the things I'm known for, going vending with Conway, it used to be the English language only had numbers up to 1 big that was 10 to the 63rd, and we extended the English language up so you can now name a number of any size. Um, so,
All
right,
right.
big numbers, right?
One last question, and then I do want to get people's input on the science that they want to type.
Yeah,
They'll
and
have some answers. So.
we have a bunch of cool science stuff we should talk about. So, go ahead.
All right, Pavlovakis, last question from me. What is Landon's opinion of AMD's recent, somewhat serious push into the server data center market?
I applaud that. For example, I know as an example, Cisco's UCS machines, they're now selling AMD stuff as well. And I would say if you're a computer manufacturer, consider having multi-platforms. Just like you don't want to be dependent upon any one content channel, being dependent on only one chip might be a mistake because if they have problems, you're screwed. Whereas if you have potential two sources, you can pit them with each other and have them bid for contracts. You might be able to get a better deal.
Let's see. Andrew says, "Does that make 10 to the negative 17th a negative number?" You know what that's reference to. Yeah, I guess there's some people out there too that for some reason think negative numbers don't exist. I don't know what they mean by that.
But for a
I heard
long time,
that,
people
and I was
thought
just like, what does that
the
even
notion
mean?
of negative numbers was absurd, just like the notion of zero, right? How could you count zero, right? And there was a philosophical discussion. I mean, there was some Greeks
Well,
that had some
zero. Yeah,
big.
well, zero. It depends on if you want to put zero in the thing instead of natural numbers or not, right? I mean, it used to be
Yeah.
natural numbers was 1, 2, 3, 4, and then zero was not considered to be one. But now it's basically, do you want to be a natural number? I don't know how mathematicians
And
feel
this is
about
the
it
bad
anymore.
thing is does nothing exist, right? And there are people that say, is anything less than one thing? And they said no, because there's nothing, right? But the thing. So this notion of does nothing exist?
Uh, Leslie says Mint is Arc based. By the way, I've tried Linux Arch and I kind of like it, but I like the one that's kind of it walks you through it. It's the dumbed down version of Arch because Arch is like
Yeah.
the super powerful stuff. But if you don't want to be able to like do every little thing on the line level,
Yeah.
there's a version of Arch that does a lot of it for you. But he says Mint is Arch based distribution. Do you have trouble getting Hibernate to work? My laptop is UEFI, and I never got Hibernate or Suspend to work. No, I have never got to Hibernate to work correctly. Uh, However, I've noticed it depends on what browser I'm using. For some reason, and check it out. If I have like Opera up, right, it seems to work fine if I go into Hibernate and come out of it because I'll have all my
Mhm.
tabs up and I'll go to a coffee store and I'll have coffee and use their Wi-Fi and write stuff on my laptop. But if I have Chrome when I close it down, it never brings it up back right. it just never does it right. I have to reset the entire system. So I don't know why. It's just whatever seems to be whatever browser I'm running in the background. I have no idea why. So maybe want
And
to
the
check that
notion
out.
of closing a machine down and moving it is a fairly recent, in the last couple of decades thing, as opposed to when a computer was in a mainframe and in some room and very fixed, right? The notion of traveling computers is something that postdates the old style networking. And so the notion you can close a computer down, have your connections not time out, move to a
Right?
different spot and reopen it up, that requires some glue between your program and you. So if your program says, I know what a network address is, it's this 32-bit thingy because everything is an IPv4 address and everything is TCP,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to put it into an int and everything's going to work fine. Code like that, when you all of a sudden say, guess what? You're going to move from an IPv4 to IPv6 to some
Have
wireless
they done
thing.
anything with IP6 yet? Because I keep on saying they're doing architecture with their IP6, but it's not used for anything yet. Did that kind of
Um,
get left behind? Because everything's still 4 that I've seen.
yeah, I mean that's actually a problem. There's a lot of stuff that uses IPv6 that you may not be aware of. A lot of telephony, right?
Oh well,
Cellular
okay,
stuff
well,
is using stuff in IPv6
I
range.
wouldn't have any use for any of that.
A
Yeah,
lot of phones. When you're making a telephone call, you're probably making an IPv6
yeah. I'm
connection.
talking more like computer protocols. But yeah,
Yeah.
I can get that. I guess Jake 3D says, "Do you have an opinion on 0 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals negative 1/12?" Yeah, I did a thing on that a long time ago.
Yeah.
That's what's called analytical continuation.
Yeah, and if you
And
say it equals that, you're going to get
yeah, it doesn't. It equals
wrong
it
on your
equals
math test.
negative 112R, where R stands for a special type of, and I hate pronounces this guy's name, legitimate. You say
Ramanujan.
Ramanujan.
Yes.
I cannot say this guy's name. A Ramanujan summation, which is a type of analytical continuation. So it's what it's basically doing is saying, instead of having it as a divergent series where it blows up, I'm going to do a different type of summation where it can actually give me something to it, right? So there's different ways of doing analytical continuation. There's telescopic series, like if I say like what's the summation of 1 plus negative 1 plus 1 plus negative 1. So there's different ways of doing that. So, but you can't just say it's negative 112. That doesn't tell the whole story, and it is really based upon the Riemann function.
Mm-hmm.
Heavily involved in that. So if you really want to look in the
Riemann.
negative
Yes.
112, Riemann,
Riemann.
Riemann.
You know German enough. It's
Yeah,
Riemann, right?
yeah. No, you speak these languages. I know. I just try to wrap my head around the concepts.
Please,
But
please go ahead.
the zeta
Your
function,
explanation is spot on, brother.
yeah, the
Keep
zeta
going.
function, and so when you're dealing with that, and you can kind of see why it actually kind of works. Some of these, learning about math is kind of cool because it's kind of in a way you learn one thing like a module, and you learn another one, and they all kind of integrate with each other. Huh, do you see what I did there? They
Yeah,
integrate with each other.
excellent.
There's a
Yeah,
pun there
right.
somewhere.
Great pun. But when someone says, well, what does this thing about analytic continuation? Well, think of it this way. Here's an analogy, right? You can count objects: 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep, 4 sheep. And you say, well, if I have 3 sheep and take away 1 sheep, I have 2, 2 to 1, 1 to 0. And then you ask, well, what is it if I take away a sheep from 0 sheep? What do I have? And you would say, well, that's absurd. You can't have. But if you do a continuation of the number line,
Right.
you say, well, I have negative 1 sheep, right? And you
Right.
might say, kind of analogy to borrowing. That's what analytic continuation does. It says there's this space where the solutions don't directly make sense, but we can have a continuation into that space where under different rules they make sense.
Math
So
math does not have to comport with reality, and
yeah,
even in real numbers, you have the real number line. There's a type of real number line that's called the extended number line, where you actually can actually deal with infinities a lot better. And
yeah,
so,
because in mathematics you can pick your axiomatic system, right?
yeah, mm-hmm.
And so there is a mathematical axiotion that says, okay, the Riemannian sums in this area, which normally would diverge and have no value, we can change the rules, change the axioms, and produce values. So that summation of stuff of all those values, in the analytic continuation, where you sort of change the rules, that sum will converge, Riemannian converge to negative 1/12. And it's a surprising result, but to then say that equals negative 1/12 would get you a wrong on the math test, right? It's not even partial credit. You would get 0 marks if you said the summation of all those integers is the infinite series is -1 over.
All right, I got one more question from Puff, and then you're done, Puff. I love you, brother. We gotta move on to other things. Puff asks, I can't resist. What's the skinny on Huawei? Were they falsely blacklisted, and are they really doomed now that Samsung has canceled their memory module orders?
Oh, you're referring to Huawei?
Huawei? I don't speak
Huawei, right? The intellectual property theft company. Not that I have an opinion on that. My recommendation is to not engage with Huawei employees, not engage with any of their products, not use networks that have their stuff in it. If your government is buying stuff from there, petition your government to get them out. If they have them in your network, get rid of their stuff. Furthermore, there's other things I wish I could say, but let's just say that there's some people that have been arrested, and
there's some major stuff going down there.
They're guilty as hell, and they deserve to be in jail for an extremely long period of time for things you don't yet know about.
But that'll eventually come out?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
Artisan Tony, $10, but can he do this? I don't know what this is, but can he do that? Probably.
Well, what is this?
I don't know. Whatever it is, fill in the blank. Yeah, Landon can do a lot of things. He's like,
But I am finite, right? I don't have. I can't.
No, you are eternal. So, we're already going into 72 minutes. I usually keep the DEF CONs down to 90 minutes, so I want to kind of like. I know we were going to type what news, but you know what? We might have to wait till another time. I still want to get to people that want to give us some suggestions of topics you want to explore as this channel progresses on other things. And we're going to do DEF CON 1 every so often. I've been kicking around a lot of stuff of what we're going to do for shows. I got so many people involved in projects. I'm not quite sure the direction we're going to go. It's going to take several weeks to say the least. But until the meantime, I like doing stuff like this. I love having the science conversations. I love the fact people are interested in these kind of conversations. The DEF CON 1 science also going to include philosophy a little bit. I'll get Nick to come in and we'll talk about that. Although I have Ask a Philosopher, but so like I might do the DEF CON once every week or every other week, and just as a filler kind of stuff because we have also the Rum and Coke nights coming up, and we're going to keep busy on this channel. So what do you guys want to see? And let me know specifics because I know a lot of people. Landon knows a lot of people, and I know a lot of people that know a lot of people that are smart people that may want to come on and talk about certain subjects. So if you guys can give us the subjects, we can then work together to find somebody that is experienced on that topic and bring them in and have these types of conversations, right?
So while we're giving suggestions, big important news: antimatter appears to follow quantum mechanical weirdness, right? When you do this E equals mc squared, we convert energy into matter and back and forth. When you actually,
formula, yes.
The mass equilibrium formula, when you convert energy into mass, you get equal amounts of matter and antimatter. But you look around the universe, and it appears to be all matter, right?
We're matter heavy here. So where's the missing antimatter?
It appears that early in the universe we had some asymmetry, either that we didn't get enough.
That's what I've always said. There's symmetry breaking.
There was created, or matter and antimatter annihilated, and we have the sort of like one.
Okay, but here's the problem with that.
Part over.
But here's the problem with that. I always said that there's some kind of symmetry breaking going on there. So you're going to have a preponderance of matter for antimatter. But what's the reason why we have that symmetry breaking? What is something about the universe that says, hey, I'm going to take this type of substance over this type of substance when the matter and antimatter are pretty much the same thing, just opposite. Right.
But the extreme, that where a principle might be okay, like Newtonian mechanics might be okay for a while. If you get into extreme conditions like relativity conditions, it doesn't apply. Similar thing. So it could be that some of the stuff that we know about normal physics breaks down or doesn't apply.
Right, but it still has to
of early universe.
Sure, and I believe it breaks down, but it still doesn't explain why it has a propensity towards one and not the other. There needs to be a reason for that. If you subscribe to sufficient reason, obviously, but
we don't really know.
We have no idea. We have
but
absolutely no
again,
idea.
science is about questions, and that's a fantastic question person asked. And scientists are really excited because they realize they don't know and they're trying to learn. So one of the things that we know is we had an experiment where we were able to create antimatter. It's hard to keep around because when matter and antimatter interact, it goes poof and you get energy, right? So to hold on to antimatter for a long time without getting interacting with matter, it's a big trick. And to do experiments with it is a big trick. So they managed to get antimatter and go through a double slit experiment, right? Where normal matter, like the electron, goes through two slits and it interferes with itself, and you get this interference pattern.
Yeah,
Well,
we are gonna do a DEFCON on that, by the way, the double
it
slit.
turns out
with
that
you.
positron's antimatter
And
also does the same quantum mechanical weirdness, right?
yeah,
And so
I really want to do a discussion on the whole
that's a
double split.
big that's a big deal. That matter and antimatter are both strange, and it appears from experimental evidence with experimental precision as strange as each other is. That quantum mechanics doesn't say antimatter gets to do something different.
Not to be confused with strange matter, which actually is such a strange quark. But
Yeah.
Jake 3D, I think the 1, 2, 3 equals negative 112 exploits a coincidence of small numbers because it just so happens that x quantity x plus 1 divided by 2 has an area of negative 112 under y equals 0 coincidence. Well, again,
Yeah.
I think there's a curve there on the zeta function. It's actually, I think, a linear thing, but that zeta function really kind of explains why it is. If you put in the like 0 for the zeta function or 1 for the zeta function, and that also gets into like factorials and a whole bunch of other stuff. But anyways, let's see what else we got here. Man, these things go by so fast. It's already been 77 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what I know makes a good conversation. All I do is I look at the time, and it seems to be going by fast. I know we're having a good conversation because the bad conversations drag on in perpetuity forever. I mean, it's just wow. Okay, so Leslie Russell says, if you have some antimatter and slightly more matter, wouldn't you have slightly antimatter at the end of the conversion than you did before?
So you say if you have slightly more matter than antimatter?
If you have some more antimatter and slightly more matter, wouldn't you have slightly more antimatter at the end of the conversion?
And they interact. They're basically, because you got to get matter, antimatter, it's got to find partners.
There's a complete annihilation.
And make energy. Yeah. And so you'd have some partners left over that say, where's my matter to interact with? But in this universe, it's so dominated by matter that eventually some matter is going to come along, side of the chamber, whatever it, and go boink and goes poof. Yeah. So getting antimatter, having it around, has been only very recent experiments. But people are asking fundamental questions such as, if you have some anti-atoms, do those atoms fall in a gravitational field identically to normal matter, right?
Right.
Answer appears so within experimental area is yes. Antimatter seems to be conferred by gravitational fields just like normal matter within our.
So I think people are interested in factorials. I think they may want to have a discussion one day on how factorials work. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, in fact, there's an example of a continuation function. You know that we say, well, what's 5 factorial? It's 5 times 4 times 3, 2 times 1, right? 6 factorial, 6 times 5 times 4 times 3, 2 times 1. Well, ask yourself, what would 5.5 factorial be?
Yeah, when you're doing stuff like, I've done stuff like that, and it's kind of trippy. And then when you start getting into the like 0 factorial, which it's weird. People may not know this, but the reason 0 factorial is equal to 1 is merely because we say so.
Yes.
Just because mathematicians say so. There's no rhyme or reason other than mathematicians have gotten together because they're all smart dudes, and they said, you know what, we're going to make this an equality.
Yeah, just like mathematicians say 1 is not prime, right? Because they say so. But
anyway,
right. So
how do you feel on that, by the way? I think I asked you before, but I don't remember what you said.
Oh, I mean, I think not treating 1 as prime makes sense. And in fact, for most of the history of mathematics, 1 was not considered prime. There's some people started showing up around the late 1500s, and it became a little bit in fashion by mathematicians in the 1800s, and by, I think, the last known publication of a mathematical journal where it was prevalent, where it said 1 was prime, was like in 1911 and so forth. So there was a period of time between 1500 and there. But you talk about some of the original Greeks and some of the original Chinese that were dealing with prime numbers none of them considered one
Yeah,
big
but
prime.
by the way, I'm being a little hyperbolic on the whole zero factorial equals one. There are actual reasons for it. I'm aware of it. I mean, if you try doing a
Yeah,
Taylor series, which is a special kind of Maclaurin series, well, actually, Maclaurin series is a special kind of Taylor series. I always get
yeah,
those confused. But
yeah.
if you ever try doing a Taylor series with zero factorial and you don't make it one, it's not going to work out right. So there
Yeah.
are
So
reasons
there's
why,
a function
but
called the gamma function, right?
the
So when
gamma
you say,
function.
well, 4 factorial is 4 times 3 2 times 1, what do you mean 4.2 factorial? Well, there's a gamma function which you think it's a continuation over
That's
into
actually
real
coded.
numbers.
There's actually a code. I mean, in programming language, they have a
Yeah.
gamma function code.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And in
that
part because
releases
it's
that.
faster than, so if you sit there and say, what's 300 factorial, you don't have to go multiply. There's a gamma function that can get you that thing for there. So other news, that particles like protons have have something called spin. Spin is the quantum version of the whirling top. It's that the things like protons have angular momentum. Well, we know we've now, and a proton is really just a frothing sea of quarks, right, and stuff. Well, we've been able to take the quantum mechanical calculations and show that frothing of quarks produces a proton with its spin, right? They've been able to actually, it's complicated, and,
Well,
and it turns
the
out,
quarks have non-integer spin. I mean, quarks are like like 1/3, one
yes,
half,
yes,
negative 1/3. Yeah. So I mean, the combination of the up down or down down up
yeah, and
would give you
so
the one spin.
they have this sort of sea of these transient quarks. So for it turns out that how a proton gets its spin is actually surprisingly complicated. But we now have some, from quantum mechanical basis, understanding of how the proton has the spin that it does from the calculations, and it's proton has a C, has more down quarks than up antiquarks, but
But don't you
counterintuitively
think
the
those are more of
proton
an
spin comes from up and down
But
antiquarks.
don't you think that's more of an analogy? I mean, we look at a spin like an electron spin, and we look at a proton spin, and we think of it as like the Earth rotating around an axis, right, a centerline axis. But in reality, it's more that's a way we conceptualize it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a way
Don't
of
think of,
interpreting the angular momentum. It's not that the actual
yeah.
particle is spinning like you would think
Yeah.
that. It's a little bit. It's a lot
Spin is
different than
not
that.
this sort of thing in
Yeah.
quantum mechanical world.
But a lot of people don't
Um,
see that. They think when they see like when they read the angular spin of a proton, they think it's actually spinning just like the Earth is spinning. And
yeah.
even though there's mathematically and in physics an analogy for relating that to the angular momentum, that's not exactly what's going on ontologically. So it's
Yes.
just a way of
Yes. And
looking at it that works, so we can conceptualize it easier.
so if you call it Kurds and Way, you say, well, the proton's Kurds and Way is one. Then you say, well, what's Kurds and Way? So they said they call it spin because there's kind of like a a quantum mechanical analogy to a whirling top.
Yeah, and
But they
there's
don't.
reasons for
It's
that
not,
too.
even though it's called spin, it's not like
but
totally
when you learn this kind of stuff, it just helps you understand the math behind it. Like for example, when you learn about hyperline structures, right? Fine structure constant, and you see that you have the angular momentum and it's offset a little bit, and you have a torque trying to write it up, and that torque when it tries to write up because it's under a magnetic field, it'll try to align itself to the direction of the spin, and by doing so, it has to release energy. And by
yes.
releasing that energy, it releases a photon, and then you get you have one spinning up and one spinning down. You can have a difference in the photon energies. One's going to be a higher
There's
energy, one's going to be low.
effect on there.
That
Yes.
splits your spectral lines. That's what's called the hyperfine line structure. That split in
And
that structure.
and by the way, that split is how they started doing some really accurate clocks,
Yes.
because those two frequencies are very, very, very close to each other. So if you tune something to be right in the middle between those two
You're
lines,
exactly right. That's how atomic clock. Yeah.
yeah. So those are important things about, in terms of time on there. There's by the way, it's interesting enough that one of the things I think that we should talk about is um, Marguerite Burbridge was a astronomer. She was, had celebrated her 100th birthday. Well, we'll celebrate her 100th birthday on August 12th. And one of the things that she basically taught us about is the nuclear process. She was the one that put a lot of rigor into nuclear processes within stars and the nucleosynthesis, right? And she actually put it on really firm footage of how it's done. So this notion of you are stardust, and she really did do the hardcore calculations to show how stars do their stuff. And she's still alive, and over there lives in Somerset, United Kingdom. An amazing person who's done an extraordinary amount. I mean, you just assume, oh, stars, fusion, all that sort of stuff. Well, she put it actually on real firm footing back in the day. Her 1957, October 1957 article on modern physics, synthesis of elements in stars, how stars create stuff, was really quite extraordinary. And she, for example, figured out that quantum mechanics is necessary to explain what the sun does, right? People say, oh, the sun just has a core where hydrogen gets really squished tight and they bounce together and form helium. No, actually, if you just depended upon pressure and temperature inside the sun's core in classical mechanics, it wouldn't work, right? What has to happen is that the sun's core is so dense and so energetic that protons get near each other and quantum tunnel into each other, right? And it's the quantum tunnel banging together that forms deuterium and the heavier elements, and then supernovas and so forth. She put it on, Margaret put it on the line. I would encourage you to go out and get a Sky and Telescope issue, the one here, the July 2019 issue, talk about the moon here. And there's this really great article about her. This is someone you probably never knew about, still alive, who has done extraordinary amount of stuff for our understanding of how the cosmos works.
So many people that probably should have some notoriety. Some people that should be acknowledged for their contributions that aren't. That is for sure.
Yeah.
We got about 3 minutes left. So I want to thank the audience here for the great questions. And unfortunately, we every time we do these, we seem to have 10,000 other directions we can go down so easily, right? So there's never any shortage of things to discuss. That's for sure. I know you're going to be leaving for 4 weeks here coming up, and so I hope you have a very safe journey. So
thank you very much. I say, and people still keep asking questions. Be skeptical. Please support this guy's stuff. The links in below in terms of things. If you like this kind of content.
I have all my links in the video description. I also will shout out to the Great Debate Community, my other channel. We're going to be doing after shows from modern day debates. Say that 5 times fast. Modern day debates. He's going to have debates on that channel. We're going to have the debates on this channel. But on his debates, we're going to have the after shows on the Great Debate Community channel. So if you haven't subscribed to the Great Debate Community channel, go do that now. It's getting up there. It's got almost 4,000 subs so far. And if you want to become a patron of the channel, my Patreon has obviously been exploding, and I thank every single person that has $1. I've tried to thank every single one of them. If I have missed somebody, my apologies, but I will thank every single person that donates. I will be having a Patreon hangout on Saturday, and that's just, you guys can come in and tell me what you want to have for the channel. Give me suggestions. I'm working with a multiple amount of people to do something with this channel, like a lot of people that I just think are the most skilled, intelligent, resourceful, educated people that I know, and I think because of that, we can continue to have great scientific literacy and education and philosophy, and we're going to branch out to a whole bunch of different things, but I still going to maintain a little bit of presence debunking young Earth creationism. I know it's fruit on the ground. I get it, but I enjoy it. Okay, it's the. But I mean,
and I think also I would like to see something where we talk about how do we measure this to the sun? How do we measure the size of the Earth? How are these things actually determined?
I would love to do that.
Stuff, some of that stuff is actually quite fascinating. I'm not interested in debating facts with people, but I think if you ask,
I don't either.
How do we know that? And you say, well, when someone says, well, Alpha Centauri is 4.38 light years away, which is not quite correct.
It's 4.2 for Alpha Proxima, Alpha 4.3 on the average for Alpha Centauri.
Yeah, and say, well, how do we even know that? And what goes into that? There's a whole history of science behind just that statement that I think if people understood that, one, you know the qualifiers and so forth, but you also know what's a light year and how do we know how far away something is within some error precision. Why are we still researching this stuff? Why are we still searching stuff on there?
Yeah, arguing facts is no fun. Explaining them is.
There's also a lot of stuff, got a lot of stuff happening in science right now that have impact on you that are really important. That I think we should have a shows on. Another thing I want to do is give you guys an update about, and gals and other objects out there, sentient objects. A talk about what's going on with the Kilauea volcano in Hawaii, which is not erupting, but has surprises in what it's doing and what it might do. So I like to do a show where we say, here's what happened in the last couple of years with Kilauea, and here's what we've learned, and here's what we're puzzled about. Because the volcano is going to do something again, and it tends to be, Adam Pele tends to sort of take people's theories and
I have a suggestion for that. When we do a volcano show, I have found some really cool volcanoes on Google Earth, right? I mean,
oh yeah,
just amazing. I don't think people really know how many volcano remnants are actually out there. Even just between California, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico, hundreds of cinder cones and types of volcanoes and
and you go along and say, well, there's old volcanoes.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I never realized how many there were in the United States. There's a ton, and you can actually see them quite clearly. So
right? Alaska is full of actual active volcanoes.
Yeah.
Right? And Pitcairn, I was going to, is an old volcano spot on there. There's volcanoes are really shaping quite a bit, and it's too bad. Well, Kilauea, I almost certain Kilauea will erupt again. That'll be fun to see how it erupts. Mauna Loa, I'm waiting for Mauna Loa to go again because Mauna Loa, when it goes, I mean, Kilauea is nice, but Mauna Loa.
Well, you can see those from Google Earth too. You can actually see that they're quite active.
The best shows on Earth on there. So.
Yes, they are. All right, with that, Landon, I'm going to have to wrap this up. Again, I want to thank all my audience. Please share these videos. Please put them in Twitter. By the way, the best way to communicate with me is on Twitter now. DM me. My DMs are open. But if you also want to email me, steveaskanything@gmail.com. I try to respond to literally anybody who messages me. Unfortunately, I've been really busy lately. May not be able to hold to that for the next couple of weeks, but I'm sure going to still try.
And where can people see other content?
Look at this. Look at Modern Day Debates got some debates coming on. The Geek Room is having their stuff.
Yeah, Geek Room. Subscribe to the Geek Room.
I'm going to be on the Geek Room. I think next Thursday or something. I don't know. Frank and I need to solidify that. I've been on the Drunken Peasants lately. We've also got oh my goodness, so many. We got the Slippery Slope coming up. That's going to be with Cheshire and Dave McGinnis. That's going to be awesome. I've seen what he's been doing behind the scenes. Both of them have mad skills, by the way. And by the way, Cheshire, if I'm not mistaken, still has open commissions, I believe. If you're looking for artwork there, get a hold of Cheshire. I'm sure she will be more than happy. You've seen some of the artwork she did. She did a card for Red's Rhetoric. And I'm like, is this CGI? But I guess it's computer. I guess she actually did it all. So, I mean, it's pretty amazing. So
last statement says, please continue to ask questions. Science values questions over answers. And for Red Eye, try not to pee on very many leopards.
That's Red Eye. That sounds like Red Eye would say. Well, I'm going to leave it with this. Red Eye, be safe. I hope you don't have any spontaneous harness failure and fall into the sun, because we would miss you.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. All right. Good night, guys.
Good night.
Good night.